Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You'll see on the screen we're sharing a slideshow of just some of our fun pictures from the last couple of years. There's also a QR code if you're interested in checking out the Nexus Osaka gear. Osaka is our presenting sponsor. You'll hear us speak about them many times this evening. But we'll let the slideshow run for just a couple more seconds, and then I'll take some time to introduce myself, and then we'll hop right into it. Thanks again for joining us this evening. I hope that this will take us about an hour and we'll take as much time as we need to answer all of your questions. I'm Liz Sanders. I'm the director of Nexus at USA Field Hockey, and we love doing this presentation each year because we have found from many of our returners or new players that this call really serves as a moment to learn everything that you can about our program. We've heard that some people return throughout the year and listen to the call. It will live on our YouTube channel after this. So if you missed something this evening, you'll always be able to go back and take a look. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just thanking everyone that works behind the scenes. So at USA Field Hockey, myself, Casey Nieder, and Taylor Rideout work full-time in the Nexus office. We each have our own roles, but we're always accessible. You can reach us by email. And then if you have general questions, we have a Nexus inbox, which is nexus@usafieldhockey.com, and that is operated by us as well. So anytime you have a quick question that you can't seem to get answered, please don't hesitate to use that inbox. We also have a group of regional staff. So especially if Nexus is something new to you, I'm just going to take a minute to walk through exactly how our regions are supported. So each of our regions has their own staff. They're coupled into super regions based mostly on geography. So we have region 3 and 4 operated by Jess and Jen. You can see their contact information on the screen. Regions 5 and 6 are managed by Brittany and Chris. Again, contact on the screen. Regions 7 and 8, Jordan and Nicole. Regions 9 and 10, Jill and Val. And region 11, Madison and Michelle. You can see that each region is divided by administrative manager and coach manager. All questions related to registration, site-specific information, any kind of player-related issues, those questions should all be directed to your admin manager. So most likely, if you're joining this call, you're joining because you're interested in signing a player in your family up for Nexus, or maybe you are the player. So at this point in the journey, the admin manager is probably who you're going to be reaching out to. If we happen to have people on the call that also are coaches or potentially coaches joining us to learn more, and you're interested in actually coaching in our program, all staff related questions, questions around curriculum and delivery of the Nexus product itself, those things go to our coach managers. So you can see that you're well supported within your super region. We really encourage you to use those contacts. The Q&A, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but the Q&A function is available this evening, and hopefully we'll be able to utilize that throughout. You're able to enter questions into the chat. I'm segueing there because if you have questions that are very regional specific, let's say, for example, you live in North Carolina where I do, and you know that all of the North Carolina Nexus dates are not yet available because we're still trying to confirm them with a couple of colleges. It's best for you to reach out to the regional team to get that type of information. So you can use the Q&A function to ask those kind of questions this evening. We might not have answers to all of them, but if you have region-specific questions, we really encourage you to develop that relationship with the manager that's going to be a big part of your Nexus process. So on to the housekeeping pieces. Like I said, we're going to use the Q&A function. This meeting is going to be recorded. It will be emailed out, and then it will also live forever as a link on our website. So if you miss anything, like I said, if you have to cut out early, if you know someone that couldn't be with us this evening, rest assured you'll have plenty of opportunity to review the details at a later time. So I'm going to divide kind of the conversation tonight into three parts. The first part is really like the registration, the what is Nexus, the logistics around what you would be signing up for if you were to participate in our program in 2025. And then eventually I'll segue into the specifics of the program, like week to week, so you know what that looks like. And then we'll also talk about what comes next when program delivery kind of commences at the end of the spring. So the big pieces of Nexus 2025 are that registration will launch in January. And the way that we do our registration is that our initial registration period is open to returning players. Returning players in our terms are anyone that participated in Nexus in 2023 or Nexus 2024. So if you participated in one of those 2 years, your invitation will be open January 7th, 2025. Once you log in, you choose the site that you would like to participate at. If you were a previous year participant, then when you sign up, you have a performance rating, and we'll get into performance rating and what they mean. It's really just categories for us on site. But your performance rating will follow from the most recent time that you participated. If you were, for example, a Nexus Championship participant in 2024, you automatically become an elite level performance rating, which is a 1 out of 4 on our scale. And so that first period is open for about 2 weeks to all of our returners. That also includes any potential partner camp athletes that we have from this calendar year. So we kind of give early access, we'll call it, to the players that have been with us for a couple of years. Then about 2 weeks later, on the 21st of January this year, we're set to then open up registration to anyone new. We usually assume that people on this call this evening are new to Nexus, but maybe we have some returners learning what's coming up this year. So if you are new, or if you're listening to this post recording after the meeting, the registration will launch open for you on January 21st. It's a really pretty simple registration. You log in, you choose your site from your regional location. There is a brief assessment piece that you have to fill out, which is just based on personal assessment. We ask players or families to, consult some of the resources they have that have been a part of the player's development up until this point, and they can help them choose which performance group they would like to be in or think that they best fit into. That performance group is really just used for your very initial placement in your first day of Nexus. And then once you're there on site with us, our staff is constantly evaluating and making sure that players are moved around to the right performance groups. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those look like and how that works on a later slide. Another really important aspect of registration is that we have a significant amount of financial aid available. We work really hard year over year to build out a financial aid fundraising campaign at the Nexus Championships each summer. And we're proud to say that we had another record year where we've raised more money than we've ever raised before. Over $150,000 was raised this past summer to help support the financial aid fund. It is our goal that cost is not a prohibitive factor for anyone that wants to do Nexus in the United States. The most important thing, though, about financial aid is that you fill out the financial aid form ahead of that registration period, because then our staff is able to preset your registration to match the financial aid you've qualified for, so that there is no delay in that registration period. Our financial aid application is available through the QR code on your screen. And again, any questions that you have related to financial aid, most of those should come to the Nexus inbox so that we can handle those kind of at the national level. But we really encourage you to use this opportunity if it's something that would help your player or family participate in the program. Quickly, we just like to talk about, since we're talking about registration, we recognize that there are some times where, you register and then you quickly need a refund. This is something that has developed over the years. Refund request, medical withdrawals, kind of anything that relates to I've registered and now I am no longer able to participate in the program. All of those need to go through our refund request form, which lives on the Nexus website at USA Field Hockey. Nexus, and I'll again talk more about this down the line, it's divided up into 3 weekends. It's 6 different training sessions. And so we just need to make sure that it's really clear that we don't prorate that. If you ask for a refund prior to March 1st, it's more likely that you can get that refund for the full program. But if in the period between when you register and when Nexus launches, you realize that you can't make 3 out of the 6 sessions, we don't do a prorated refund for 50% back. So it's kind of all or nothing. If there is a medical condition that occurs after March 1st, then we will definitely reflect on the circumstances of that situation, and we can potentially do a partial refund back depending on what the injury is. But otherwise, no refunds are processed after March 1st, 2025. So it gives you plenty of time from when you first registered to really depict any issues that you might have ahead of the Nexus program launching. We get a lot of questions about makeup or missed sessions. We don't really have an attendance policy. I think the most important thing to know about Nexus is it's kind of twofold. It's development program, so it's opportunity to train, to learn, to grow as a player, and then kind of mixed in there is this idea that we're also assessing and eventually selecting players. So the more often that a player is present, the better chances they have of us being able to assess them fully. So we really encourage athletes to be able to attend as many sessions as possible, but there is no penalty if you're unable to attend a session here or there. So we do offer makeup sessions. The tricky thing about makeup sessions is that some of our sites will meet capacity. We have gone, we've gone to what's called a wait list in a few different locations across the country now for a couple of years. And so we can't just have players kind of showing up at will to do a makeup session. So a makeup session is required to have approval by that regional admin manager. So if you sign up for Nexus and you realize that, one weekend you have another sport event because you play a spring sport and you'd like to make that up at a different location in your region, just a quick reach out to the admin manager and they'll be able to let you know if it could be approved for that makeup to happen somewhere else. We'll talk about what's called selection camps at the end, and you'll see on the screen now that if you need to make up a selection camp if you're invited, that requires a different type of Google form approval and that technically needs to be approved by me. But you'll find that information out further down the line. If you are in fact advanced to that portion of the process, then you'll be given some options in the event that you need makeup options. All right, so let's get into really what is Nexus. So this is the stuff that's new for 2025. And of course, we're going to talk about the things that remain. But for all of you that are joining us and have been with us for a few years, some exciting new pieces are going to be part of Nexus this year. We'll talk repeatedly about what we call our kind of player resource space that lives inside our In the Circle member app. You'll see it now. There's a QR code on your screen. If you do not have the In the Circle app on your mobile device, we really encourage you to download it. And then you can just log in with your membership credentials. Once Nexus is live, this is going to be a key component of participating in the program because we have tried really hard over the last few years to make Nexus a holistic approach to the game. So that's not just what's happening on the field, but it's what's happening off the field as well. So this year, some things that we're going to add to the app space are some new video resources. We have kind of an open library between both our senior women's national team and our junior high performance programs. And so you'll see some new video resources in there that are specific to both the tactics of the game, the decisions that we're making, and the way that we're playing the game, as well as some technical resources around more of the skill related pieces to hockey. We developed over the last year what's called a player wellness hub, and we are opening that up to all Nexus participants for 2025. We're really proud of it. I think it is something that you'll use, maybe not even just in like your hockey journey, but if you do play other sports or maybe just your overall personal wellness journey. There's nutrition information in there and some mental health pieces, lots of ideas around recovery and what you do both before you train and after you train. So lots of really good stuff in the Wellness Hub that we hope is moving in the right direction to allow players to really be prepared to get the most out of this experience. Another really exciting one that we're adding this year is we're going to do a live video session that's going to be run by a top video analyst with us. And so all Nexus participants will be invited to that Zoom session, and we'll do some video analysis there, which is another big part of the game that's really advancing over the last few years with all the capabilities that we have. So lots of exciting things coming for our players. There's also some things coming for our coaches. So as I said earlier, if you're joining us this evening and you would like to coach, or you already coach in the program and you're just here to learn what's next, we're also going to add some resources there into the member app. We've updated our coach refresher course. That's something that we introduced in 2024, which is a mandatory course that all coaches for Nexus have to take to make sure that our delivery across the country is as consistent as possible. And we've added some new presenters in there, including our high performance director, Craig Parnham. We'd love to always hear from him. So hope that everyone enjoys that. And then we'll continue to expand the coaches' online resources as well through those links to our women's national team and our junior high performance program, as I said earlier. So exciting 2025 ahead of us. One of the number one questions we get about Nexus before we jump into the kind of grit of what the program is really important to understand our age groups. I know that many of you participate in USA Field Hockey's club event space, and I obviously am aware that our club events age groups have changed this year to more align with our grad years. Nexus is really bound by age groups as it relates to our international qualifications and competition. So ultimately, the end of a Nexus cycle is the Nexus Championships each summer in July. And at the Nexus Championships, we are doing our final selections to what we call our junior national camps. And at our junior national camps, which actually just took place this past weekend, we are choosing athletes that will make it onto the final roster for our U16, U18, and U21 junior national teams. But those teams do not compete until the spring of the following year. So we're selecting them in July. For example, this past year, we're selecting them in July of 2024. Those players will not compete for those teams until sometime April, May, June, maybe even later of 2025. And so you must remain age group eligible through the date of the competition for the junior national team. And that's why you will repeatedly see that Nexus age groups and the corresponding birth years are different than our events age groups and birth years. It does not put any birth year at a disadvantage. It still puts every birth year coupled with the group of players either born just slightly before them or slightly after them. And you'll see on your screen what the corresponding birth years are for 2025. We put this information anywhere possible to see it. So it is in the Nexus on the website, it's on our regional pages, it's everywhere that you can possibly look. So hopefully we won't get too many questions with that. But if you do have a question, please refer to your regional pages where the age groups are posted at the top. And then when you are signing up for a site, it usually also tells you which birth years are corresponding to that site. And so hopefully there won't be too many issues with that, but just want to make sure we spend some time clarifying that our birth years are different than the birth years for our other events. So I've been kind of hinting at this idea that we have what's called 4 performance groups, and our 4 performance groups are Emerge, Aspire, Perform, and Elite. And we find that those 4 groups are the appropriate number of groups to have, especially at our large Nexus site. So once a player is on site at Nexus, they are, if possible, divided into age groups initially. And then if there are enough players in that age group to then divide by performance group, they will then be divided into these different performance groups. I'm not going to read through them. They are available on our website. I think the most important thing to understand is that an emerging player is not a beginner player. It's not someone that's never played the sport or just picked up a stick last week and decided to give it a go. An emerging player is just on a scale to a player that's ready to compete for our junior national team. So our elite players are those players that are competing at Nexus Championships each year per age group and really at the top of their game. And so hopefully we can all see that within that scale, there would be multiple levels below that. And so take a look at this on our website. If you are a new player and you're registering for the first time, this is something you'll need to understand because you'll put yourself in one of these categories for that first session. And then, as I said earlier, our staff on site will make sure that we are dividing you up appropriately based on our assessment. So when I was talking about resources earlier, one of the things, what we call the player resource is an online primer. And so what the primers are, kind of implicit in the name, is that it prepares you as a player for each weekend of Nexus. So you have a weekend 1 primer, a weekend 2 primer, and a weekend 3 primer. All of these live inside the member app. So you can see again on your screen, we have the QR code to download the app. And a quick snapshot of what the In the Circle kind of logo and the app looks like. Once you log in there, if you're registered for Nexus, then the athletes will be able to see their athlete page and all of the information that will flow down through the primer for that player. This is the In the Circle app, just a quick snapshot. Obviously, Nexus is not the only thing that is accessible in there. All of our membership benefits are accessible in there. If you are a coach, it is our learning management system. So there are different courses that you can take. If you're an umpire, there's different courses. And then there are even resources for our parents. So we're just really trying to drive traffic to the member app in general, because we feel like it is a quick, easily accessible place where you can kind of get any of the information you need as a USA Field Hockey member. And then Nexus specifically really uses this for all of these extra resources that are available to our players before, during, and after their sessions in the Nexus season. So here's some of the player resource slides like we talked about. You can see on the screen here, there's some things around mental wellness. This is just a quick snapshot of the Wellness Hub. On the far side of the screen, you can see a picture of Maddie. And we have some interviews with our women's national team players sitting in this player resource. I find them to be really interesting, especially the interviews were actually done prior to Paris qualification. So now, having been able to follow their journey as new Olympians, it's just really exciting to listen to kind of what they have to say. And honestly, to realize that even players that are at the very top of their game struggle with some of the same things that, the players that we all know do as well. So it's a really relatable experience. And hopefully if you sign up for Nexus, it's something you enjoy. It's something that we're super proud of. I'm going to pause. That's kind of all the resources that live virtually. And now I'm going to talk more about like, what is the program? What are the specifics? Most important thing in understanding the program is that really weaved, but through the entire Nexus program, you'll see this weaved in our coach ed department in terms of coaching principles. You see it certainly at our junior and senior level is what we call the USA way. And really what it is this idea of a united approach. It has a common language. We try to be as consistent as possible so that when players are involved in practicing the game and developing the game at USA Field Hockey, they're experiencing this USA way that's really integrated throughout. So Nexus is broken down into 3 training weekends, as I said earlier. So Nexus weekend 1 is 2 sessions. We call them training camps 1 and 2. Each session is approximately 3 hours, depending on the size of your site. Sometimes with rotations and just transitions, your session is actually set for like 3.5 hours or so. But the actual on-field participation doesn't vary site to site. It's just a matter of kind of those logistics of how we can get groups on and off. So weekend 1, training camps 1 and 2. The 4 performance groups that I spoke about earlier are kind of the main objective, making sure that we're getting that initial assessment for any new players, making sure we're getting a quick new assessment for any of our returning players. And really, the most important thing is that we're starting to introduce like, what is Nexus? What is the philosophy? And one of the most important aspects that you'll hear me talk about throughout the next few slides is that Nexus is a player-driven program. The players are at the center of what we do, and that means a lot of decisions that I make personally and that my team makes on a regular basis are made with the player's best interest in mind. But it also flows into the training environment where the player is really driving their own vehicle. We want them to ask a lot of questions. They get a player reflective journal where they can write down some notes about, how the session went, some things that they loved, maybe some things that they want to work on, maybe a new skill that they learned. We want them to make sure that they are engaging with the coaches on site. If they have questions, be sure to ask them. We want to create an environment that is really open and free of judgment so that players are in an optimal space to learn and to grow. And that really takes some time for us to set the stage. What hopefully you will not see is coaches with a joystick, as we like to call it, that are directing players what to do in every moment. We want to be asking them questions about how they are experiencing the game itself. How does it feel? What are they learning? What's working, what's not working? Those are the kind of things that hopefully you see throughout the Nexus season. And that first weekend is really building the foundation for what that's going to look like. The next weekend, training camp 2, we can call this, weekend 2, we call this training camps 3 and 4. Hopefully now we're kind of getting into the groove. Players sort of know what to expect. And at this point, we really want to accelerate some of that learning, really get players thinking about the principles of the play. So less about when this happens, do this, and when that happens, do that, and more about when we don't have the ball, what are some things we want to be thinking about? When we do have the ball, what are some things that we want to be thinking about? We hope by weekend 2, players have really embraced the idea of utilizing those resources that live in the member app so that they come to sessions better prepared with more intention. You'll see throughout Nexus, and there will be a slide later, our entire approach is based on the idea of small games for understanding. And so most of what you'll see is really small-sided play. Some of it to goal, some of it not to goal. Some of it looks a bit more like what you would call keep away. We call that rondo. And so it's very active, hopefully not a lot of long lines, not stagnant, singular motions, but everything that looks and feels like the game of hockey, and then in, just different situations and different elements. And so by weekend 2, that should be a really clear piece of what the players are experiencing, and off we go. Finally, in weekend 3, what we call training camps 5 and 6, at this point, we should just be kind of rolling along. We are assessing players throughout this time. So weekends 1, 2, and 3, assessment is always happening. It's flexible, it's variable. After each weekend, our site managers connect with our coach managers and provide ratings back to us so that we are able to track an athlete's progress at any moment in the program. I should quickly be able on a Tuesday morning to go pull my name if I'm at a site and know exactly how my experience has been and what rating I have at that time. We are on weekend 3, we're really encouraging players to have those conversations with coaches. A really important thing that is kind of a buzzword these days is this idea of feedback. And I like to be really clear, we do not provide written feedback to players. Again, the player journal is the most important thing the player has. It's meant to be reflective of their experience. And what we hope happens is each weekend they're having these small conversations that are very rich in feedback with maybe their peers, with the coaches on site, maybe even with themselves, so that when they leave Nexus, they do have a pretty nice picture of what their training season looked like. And then they can kind of start to plan on, whatever comes next in the year for them, what pieces they might want to take with them that they learned from Nexus. So by the time they leave this 3rd weekend, we hope that that has occurred. The other thing that happens at the end of the 3rd weekend is that we are then, there is a selection moment. And so at the end of the 3rd weekend, whenever that is for each site, we are selecting players on to what's called our regional selection camps. And I don't like to give exact numbers. We estimate that about 60% of the total players in Nexus nationwide will get advanced to selection camps. I can positively say that last year it was more than 60%, probably closer to 65% of the players in 2024 were advanced to selection camps. We don't announce those advancements to selection camp until after the 3rd weekend is complete in the respective region. We always put a little asterisk because things can happen. One year we had a major weather issue. And so if there is some sort of issue based on the distance and timing of the selection camp event, and we need to get invites out earlier, we reserve the right to do that, but it happens very rarely. So that's kind of the 3 weekends of Nexus. And I'll pause there. If I wasn't clear about it earlier, I will take questions at the end. You should just put those in the Q&A, and then Casey will kind of put those together at the end, and any that I haven't gotten to or haven't been clear on, we'll do a little Q&A with that. So if there's something I didn't answer about the Nexus process itself, please throw that into the Q&A now, because we're going to segue onto a few other things. Another big topic that we get a lot of questions about is our goalkeeping, coaching, and instructing. So number one, Nexus is not only open to goalkeepers, but we really proudly stand on the experience of our goalkeepers. Each year, the number of goalkeepers that we welcome into the program grows. Last year, it was so large that we almost ran out of goalkeeping jerseys because we didn't anticipate ordering as many as we had in the program. So of course we've tried to make up for that this year. But we are really, really proud of what we do. I think the most important thing to say and to differentiate very publicly is that we are not a technical program for goalkeepers. So there is not a lot of time spent in each session on technical skill acquisition for goalkeepers. So if you are a goalkeeper, you have a goalkeeper in your family and you're interested in this program, and you have been working on the timing of your ground skills, or your hand work is something that needs improved, you might get that through Nexus because we play a lot of games and we have a ton of rich decision-making environments that we will put you in. And so a byproduct of that is probably that some of those things will improve, but we will not spend a significant amount of time in each of those sessions that I previously spoke about just hammering out goalkeeping skills. We have learned to devote a little bit of time in each session, so it's not entirely games based. There is, short bits of it throughout. But I just want to be clear about that, because I hate when someone signs up for Nexus and they think they're getting one thing and then they feel disappointed by what they get. I want to be really clear on what it is and what it's not. But what it is that is exciting is this idea of small games and decision making. Most of our goalkeepers are it looks like my camera isn't working, so I'm going to keep going, and hopefully you guys can still hear me.
We can hear you, Liz.
Okay. The goalkeeping decision-making piece is so important, because that's really where you get better, right? You learn from mistakes, and all of the games that we play, both for our goalkeepers kind of independently, and then when they are involved with field players collectively, it is really fun. It's high energy. It's, tons of shots, which we know goalkeepers love to field. And so we think it's a really positive experience. We throw around this idea that a goalkeeping specialist has to have been a goalkeeper by trade. We don't think that's necessarily true. We really like to have someone devoted specifically to training the goalkeepers at each site, but that could be a coach that has just spent a significant amount of time, becoming an expert in that field. And so almost every site has one of those. I can't think of one that doesn't. So hopefully that kind of explains what we do with goalkeeping and also what we don't. This slide is just an example of what you might see at a Nexus site. So I say all the time, like, I'm 45 and my mom has been watching me play the game for, 30 years or more, and still doesn't quite understand the game of hockey. And so she can watch from a distance and not really understand what's going on. And so I always assume that some of our spectators are not clear on what's happening at Nexus sites. And we like to be really open about this. This slide is an example of a card straight out of our curriculum that's called like our 7v7 games card. And so weekend one, you might see the players playing what looks like a 7v7 scrimmage. But in weekend one, the goal of the 7v7 is zone versus man-to-man defense, and the differences in what that would look like on the field. And then in weekend two, you might see them playing 7v7, and the goal of the game in weekend two is about playing 1, 2, or 3 touch hockey, not holding possession for long, having a lot of awareness, and being able to get rid of the ball quickly. So you can see how we can kind of take a foundation of a game and advance that into multiple different parameters. And then you can see that game in every weekend of Nexus, and it might look similar, but it's not the same as it was the weekend before. So we just like to share that. So as I said, after the end of weekend 3, the next thing that comes is what's called regional selection camp. So in each of those super regions, there will be a regional selection camp. And those camps fall somewhere between the second weekend of May and the second weekend of June in that month. If you go to our website, usafieldhockey.com/Nexus, and then you go to the regions, on the schedules of each regional page, it will tell you when the regional selection camps are. Almost all of our regional selection camps also have a tentative location as well, other than maybe our region 3-4 is not quite set, but all the rest should have a tentative location, so you can be able to access what that looks like for this year. The regional selection camps, as I said, are about 65% of the players at each age group. The camps are set up very similarly to the training weekend. So each age group attends for a 3-hour time slot on Saturday and a 3-hour time slot on Sunday. And during those 3 hours, there are approximately 8 to 12 selectors that are responsible for assessing every single player at selection camp so that we can then choose the best players from each selection camp to move on to the Nexus Championships in Virginia Beach in July of 2025. We have a kind of algorithm formula to make sure that there's kind of fair, balanced regional representation from all the selection camps. And we do that based on a scale of the percent of Nexus participants that you have from a region is equal to the percent of Nexus participants that you will see at Nexus Championships. So for example, I'm going to use North Carolina again because I'm here. If Region 8, where North Carolina is, holds 15% of the U16 players in Nexus nationwide, then Region 8 should get approximately 15% of the U16 Nexus players at the Nexus Championship. So that's the scale that we use. It's important that we advance the best players to Nexus Championships because as I was explaining earlier, that is the final step before selections to Junior National Camp later 2025. This is the rating scale that we use at selection camp. This is also a screenshot right out of an application that was developed specifically for Nexus selections. And so those 8 to 12 selectors that I was speaking about earlier, they're rating every player on this 1 through 5 scale. They personally enter those ratings into an application that's, like I said, is developed just solely for us. Once all players at all camps are rated by every selector and entered into the application. The application itself has the formulas built into it, and so it just populates out to me and my staff a list of players in rank order based on their average rating. So it takes the average of the 8 to 12 selectors and gives them an overall average selection rating, and then it populates them in order so that we know exactly who we are to advance to Nexus Championships. So it really takes the bias out of the process and makes it pretty straightforward. Post-selection camp. So as I said, those are taking place through the second weekend in June this year. As soon as we can, after that final selection camp is complete, we will announce the Nexus Championship selections for 2025. That will be somewhere in that first 10 days of June. And then this is the schedule for Nexus Championships 2025. They take place at the Virginia Beach Sportsplex in Virginia Beach. It's the only place currently in the country where we have 2 contiguous water-based turfs, which are necessary to compete at this level. You'll see that each age group is 3 days long. The first day of each age group includes a practice with your team, and then games start the later part of that first day, and then there's games all day the second and third days. And then we turn over age groups the day after, and it goes in order from our youngest players to our senior players. And then it also includes our senior Nexus Championships as well. I'm going to pause there. I think I skipped a note on one of my slides. The Senior Nexus reminded me of that. I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on who's eligible for what. So the program that I just explained to you is what we call Junior Nexus. And that is for all players aged 11 through 18 and older. If they are older than 18 and still in high school, then they are in Junior Nexus. And that's why we have age groups U14, U16, U18, and U21, because we do have some high schoolers that age out of U18 but remain in high school. If you are a player that has started classes on campus collegiately, irregardless of your age, you are no longer eligible for what this Junior Nexus is that I just explained. So if you know someone that maybe is gray shirting, starting college in January, they would move into what we call our high performance centers and no longer be eligible for Junior Nexus. And then certainly if you started collegiate play in the beginning of the fall semester, you also are no longer eligible for Junior Nexus. I'm sorry that's a little out of order, but important to note. And from there, I will take some questions.
Awesome. Liz, I believe the slideshow we had on earlier was a bit confusion about the age group. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. And then if you just want to walk through the age groups of each, or the birth dates of each of the age groups, and we can just clarify that. We had a bit of a confusion there.
I am going. Yes, sure. So I'll start over to make sure it's really clear that the age group and the corresponding birth years are based on remaining eligible at that age group. For this year, it would be eligible for that age group through the spring of 2026, because you will be selected in July at that age group for potential international competition, and you wouldn't compete internationally until the spring of 2026. And so you must remain eligible in that age group through that time period. And so based on that, you will see that this year, it's our 2012 birth years and younger that are our U14 group. Our 2010 and 11s are our U16 group. Our 2008 and 9s are our U18 group. And our 2007 and olders are what's considered U21 junior Nexus eligibility. So that's what I was just talking about. That would be those players that remain in high school but are born in those birth years. So hopefully that makes sense.
Perfect. Thank you. If you guys have any questions, please, it's a good time to send them in the chat now. We'll cover this one. Question from Philip. When analyzing players to determine who progresses through the different stages, is a player's age within their age classification a consideration? For example, if a player is a U16 player, do you look at all the U16 athletes the same, or do you try and progress a certain number of the 2010 U16s or 2011 U16s?
We have not looked at birth years within the age group separately. In our tracking of that, it has not majorly differentiated, especially to selection camp. Last year, our younger group to Nexus Championship was not quite 50-50, but the U18 group tends to be 50-50-ish to both birth years. So we do not differentiate at this point, but if along the way we start to realize that that is an occurrence that is happening based on this, it's certainly something that we will reassess.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question, is this an appropriate program for, let's say, a community level player / recreational?
It's fun. That's a good question. I just had a friend ask me a personal question about this a couple days ago around their daughter. And I want to be honest. I think that Nexus is a great program if a field player has had some technical skill training. So as long as they understand kind of the basics of core skills, passing, receiving, grip is a big thing in hockey, making sure that you're holding your stick correctly, that your carrying position is positive, again, assuming it's a field player. Those types of things I think are important base level skills that are needed in order for Nexus to really make an impact. If you don't quite have that yet, I would recommend developing those skills with a private coach, with a club, with some other access that you have, so that when you get to Nexus, being able to participate in these small games, the skill piece is there and is going to develop for sure, but it isn't prohibiting you from getting to the point where the game itself is able to teach you things. I hope that answers it.
Perfect. Another question about how many players do we have at a session?
It's hard to answer that completely. So, I mean, we have some sites with 100 kids, and then we have other sites with 25 kids. I think the important thing is that each site, irregardless of the total site size, the groups are broken down into somewhere in the range of like 14 to maybe 20 kids per group. And then within that group, 1 to 2 coaches. So depending on the type of exercise that you're doing. So mostly anywhere that you'll be, you're only going to be in a training group of that range. I'm going to say 15 to 20 on average. But the site itself can be quite large if the space allows, and it is a densely populated area for field hockey, then those sites tend to be larger. Whereas if we're talking about a developing portion of the country, the overall number at those sites tends to be smaller. If you have a question specifically about the site that you might be interested in, that would be a good question for your regional manager. You know, you're interested in going to the site at Yale, ask Jess the questions around how many players are at that site.
Awesome. We discussed financial aid, but I'm not sure if we mentioned the cost of the total programs, if you just want to talk about that really quick.
Yeah, the total cost of Nexus is $595 for the program itself. So that pays for those 3 weekends of training and all the online resources that I spoke about. With that fee, you also get your player penny, which is a reversible Nexus penny, or as a field player. And then as a goalkeeper, you get a goalkeeping jersey at your site where you'll be participating. And then if you advance a selection camp, there is an additional fee for that because that's an additional fee for us. At selection camp, we usually do some cool handouts. Osaka will be at our selection camps this year. And then Nexus Championship has its own cost as well. So there's kind of a tiered version of the cost of programming. If you qualify for financial aid, we can also help provide financial aid at each of those qualifying moments. So it doesn't necessarily just apply to the program itself.
Awesome. Next question we have here. Let's see. Is the returning player already assigned to a level based on their ending classification from the prior year, or do they self-assess when they re-register?
So that's a bit two-part. For all of our players that did not make Nexus Championships 2024, but will return to Nexus in 2025, their initial rating is based on their last known rating in 2024. So initially in that first weekend, they would go in at the same rating that they left the program in, but our goal is to assess quickly because we recognize there's a lot of growth in a year. If they are a player that advanced to Nexus Championships in 2024, then they automatically become a 1 on the scale as they enter the program for 2025.
Awesome. Let's see here. If we are a new player and can't sign up until the second round of registration on January 21st, what are the chances it's already sold out or there's a wait list I have to sign up for?
The honest answer is it depends on where you live. I don't think that last year or the year before we went to wait list before we opened up to everyone, but I will be honest, and I'm not saying this to try to drive registrations. The Yale site tends to go to waitlist quick. The North Carolina site tends to go to a waitlist quick. We get near capacity at sites in other parts of Virginia and other parts of the Northeast. Chicago got very close last year. So there are some more densely populated field hockey areas that tend to go to waitlist at some point. It is not usually during that first open period. So what we would encourage is if you are a new player and you are 100% certain that you would like to participate in Nexus 2025, we recommend that you try to get registered in that first couple of days that it opens on January 21st to make sure that you can get your first choice. And then what we do beyond that is we do populate a wait list. Inevitably each year, there are some players that initially sign up that decide that they are no longer going to be a part of it. And so as those open up, we can kind of hand invite people off the wait list if needed. But we have tried to stress since 2023's launch that this would be the third year now where we anticipate waitlist in some of those areas.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. I know we're coming down here in the last couple minutes. We have a lot of questions about advancement, so I'll try to get to the most important ones here. And again, guys, if we miss anything or we don't get to your question tonight, please feel free to email nexus@usafieldhockey.com and we will definitely get anything answered for you. What percentage of players advance to regionals versus nationals?
So about 65% of the players in the program advance to the regionals. That's total programs across all age groups. Certain age groups, it's a little bit higher, but that's a approximate average. And then from there, about 30% of the players advance to Nexus Championships. It can be slightly less than that. I'm going to say 25 to 30% of the players in the age groups then advance to Nexus Championships.
Perfect. Here's one about the curriculum. They're a bit worried that the curriculum is more developing for the offensive players and not so much defensive players. Any specific curriculum for defenders during the 6 sessions?
I hear this all the time that it is offensively minded curriculum. The curriculum is based in principles. So our principles are go forward. Certainly that is offensive. 6-second regain is very clearly a defensive principle. It's all about how fast can we get the ball back when we lose it. And pack mentality is also a defensive principle. So our 3 main principles, 2 out of the 3 are defensive minded things. I can attest and tell you that our selectors have been over the last couple of years guided towards making sure we are assessing players with a more defensive approach to the game very clearly, because the truth is at the junior national level and even at the senior women's national team level, we are lacking developed defenders and backs. And so it is vitally important to the pathway that we are doing a really good job of developing these skills and making sure that we are identifying players that have a lot of potential in those positions. That doesn't mean that we are choosing a player that can tackle over a player that can, do an offensive skill. It means that our approach to selection is comprehensive. We want to see players that are going forward. We want to see players that have the mentality to win the ball back quickly. And we want to see players that know how to do that with a team defense approach. So if a player can do all those things, they're likely to get selected regardless of position.
Awesome. We'll do a couple more here. If I'm a new player, do you recommend me checking in with our club or middle school team coach to determine my self-rating?
I think that's a helpful thing to do. I'll be honest, I think most players are harder on themselves than coaches are on them. We tend to see that. So I think getting some reference points from people that regularly see you play is a really good choice to try to make sure that you're appropriately rating yourself. But I also just want to caution that don't put too much emphasis on that rating. It is something that can change, and our staff is well prepared to make sure that we are assessing and challenging you appropriately so that we can get you into the right group, because it's just as important to us as it is to you all that the players are in the groups that they're going to get the most out of.
All right, awesome. Okay, we'll do 2 more. This one says, can you kind of explain why an athlete who made it to Nexus Championship kind of have to not essentially restart, but kind of how their rating and grouping will start the process again?
Sure. Hopefully they don't have to restart. I think that's something that we are trying to be kind of really detail oriented with this year. I'm going to be honest. I think there have been a couple that have slipped through the cracks, and I can understand why someone might feel that way. So you're at Nexus Championships one year, and when you return, you feel like you're starting all over again. I hope that some of the parameters we're putting in place to make sure that when you get to your site this year, if you were at Nexus Championships, there's no question you get put in that top group, so that your experience is with the the most challenging other players at the site is a really important piece. So there's that. I think the second part of that is just that the cycle does need to restart, right? For every player that did outstanding last year and has hopes of doing just as good in this next year, we have another player whose potential has exponentially risen since last year. Maybe they didn't make Nexus championships, but now they're in a really good position to compete for one of those spots. And so we want to make sure the process is fair and equitable to all, not just to those that have done it previously. And so hopefully we have learned how to kind of balance both of those things. Again, I just can't stress this enough. I think there is this misconception that if a player goes up to a site director or a coach and asks a question about whether or not they're in the right group, that's kind of like whining behavior, or somehow that's going to be held against them. You have my word that if there are coaches out there doing that, I don't want them working in Nexus. We want this to be a place where a player can very openly make sure that they're in the right place. And so if you get to Nexus and that's not how you're feeling, I really encourage you to find someone on site so that you can advocate for yourself and make sure that you get put in the right place.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. I think that's a good place to end. Again, if you guys are joining late or if you happen to hop off early, we are recording this and we'll send out that link tomorrow. So Liz, any closing remarks from you?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. I get so excited when we're like in the hundreds of people on this call. The best way for us to spread the accurate information is to speak directly to our constituents, and I really enjoy doing this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well and learned a little bit about the program or learned some new things if you already knew. I just want to make sure I take 1 second at the end to once again thank all of our sponsors, but very specifically Osaka. If you've seen recently, in the last couple of months, we announced Osaka as our presenting sponsor once again for Nexus. It's a 5-year contract. What we do is not possible without them. I encourage you to follow the QR code and check out the gear. They'll be on site at many more events this year, but always important to thank the people that make it possible for us to deliver a program that I feel really proud of, and I think that players have an outstanding experience in. So thanks to my team, thanks to everyone that helped tonight. Wishing you the best, happy holidays, and we hope to see you out in the field next spring.